everybody, it's Anthony Brogdon, and man, oh man, the chef is, I'm telling you, I am super excited about today's guest. Let me tell you, his two or three time great grandfather. Great. So that's just two.
Yeah.
His two-time great grandfather, I idolized this gentleman. Two-time great, I idolized this gentleman. I stumbled across him, and I'll say the same about the guy who's the guest, because he's a heavyweight in his own right, but it's his great two-time great grandfather that has such a unique story that every time I speak, and this has been many occasions across America, I mention him. I'm not giving you the name just yet. I mention him. You ever heard me? I'm going to say something about that gentleman because the story is so amazing. And it's only amazing because it's rare, but it's also indicative of the resiliency, of the strength, of the mindset, of the no quit in Black people.
Yeah.
See, now y'all hear me talking now. And I said all that before I tell you I'm Anthony Brogdon, and I'm an ordinary guy trying to do something extraordinary. I love strong inspirations. You people are my family. You've been watching me, and my numbers are up. It's over 3,000 of you all, and I know it's going to grow from there, who have said, I like what you're doing, and by subscribing. So hit the subscribe button, everybody. Hit the like button. And let me tell you something. Make a comment. I'll respond to your comments, be it good or bad, because I want there to be dialogue relative to what you see and hear here at Strong Inspirations. And do this also, my friends. Hit the I said the notifications bell. So when a new video come up, you get notified. A ding, a shock, a smoke signal, your lights flicker, your horn goes off, your dog kicks you, something to let you know there's new content. Because what I'm doing now, my friends, is I'm releasing a video every day. It could be a re-release, but you didn't watch it before. But I want to come at you like this, to let you know. And it's not, and it all has various components to it. Some has a little negative slant, I'm not going to lie, because of what they did to us. Like the lady who was a sharecropper. Watch that video. I just released it. She's only in her 80s, but she grew up in a small town in Mississippi. And she kept saying, I grew up on a plantation. I said, what do you mean? Slavery was over. She said, we called it a plantation. The white man ran it like one. I said, oh my God. She said, but my grandmother was a strong lady and was not scared of that guy. She told him, we leaving. He told her, you can't leave. She said, watch me. And then they moved to that famed town called Mount Bayou, Mississippi. It's an incredible story. Look at the one I got with a lady who's 101 years old. She talked about walking 5 miles to school. We've all kind of heard that, our parents and grandparents. I walked 5 miles. This lady did it. She said the school was nowhere near close, and that was the best way to get there. I said, oh my God, what a story. Watch the one that I did with, there's a guy by name of, and he's deceased now, Herman Russell in Atlanta, had a real big construction company, and it's still operating today. And from what I gather, he wasn't like a college graduate or something, but a bad dude. I interviewed somebody to tell his story. It's here at Strong Inspirations. This August is Black Business Month. And we're going to talk about it. And that, hold on. And that makes this interview even more appropriate because it's got a business component to it for sure. In the early 1800s, I'm going back with y'all, my friends. So watch the videos, tell somebody, subscribe, and one more housekeeping. I know my man, he got to go because he heavy. You know, he doing his thing. He got books. He be reading all them books behind him. But read my book, everybody. His two-time great-grandfather is featured in this book. I'm telling you, he's an icon of mine. It's called Black Business Book, over 200 facts there are at least 30 businesses owned by former enslaved Black folks. They don't tell you that in school. I didn't know it. I found out about it, did some research, and found 30 of them. There's many more. And I feature them in this book. And it's easy to read too, because I don't give you no commentary. I get straight to the point. And I know I gotta get this out to you too. And because of my visit in Mount Bayou as a keynote speaker just recently, I decided to write another book. And the book is about Black towns and settlements. I didn't know of this real story, which leads me to how I found this gentleman. I'm looking up because I know his great grandfather is a part of that spear. And I said, well, what is it? And then I found the foundation that led me to him. And so I say, my favorite word is the word strong. In my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to the strong man on the channel today. Come on, let's get it on. Thank you for being here.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. My name is Gerald Arthur McWhorter, named after my middle name is named after my grandfather. And but I'm the great grandson of Free Frank McWhorter and Lucy McWhorter.
Oh my God. Uh okay, I'm stumbling everybody, but let me get it out. And I do this with all my guests, and I'm gonna do this with him initially. Where were you born and raised? So my audience gets to know you personally.
I was born in November of 1942 in Chicago, Illinois.
All
I
right.
was born and we lived in the Francis Cabrini projects, which was a housing development as housing subsidy for war workers. My father was a steel worker in Chicago, and that steel plant started making munitions for World War II. And therefore, we moved into this project. And what was interesting is that this project was an integrated project of war workers in 1942. It was really an amazing place.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. You say amazing because when we think of projects, we don't think of amazing.
Oh no, this was a see, projects have changed. The project I was born into, everybody had a job. These were industrial workers, World War II. What happened later, Francis Cabrini projects, where I was born, became Francis Cabrini Green projects.
Yeah, I
And
know
the
that.
green were the additions, high-rise additions, that became basically warehousing for people who were not working. And
Hey.
so you had households where the household was not organized around the people who had to work. See, where I was born, depending on what shift people had jobs, that structured the household, that structured the meals. Uh, when the new projects developed and you didn't have people working, you had a disorganization of the family and the household. And
Yeah,
therefore, you had a different socialization, a different type of growing up. Uh,
yeah. Did you
we
know those
also,
kids in the other projects?
well, see, this was much after me,
Or much after you. I see.
much
I
after
see.
me.
I
This
see.
was this was after the industrial slowdown and people started losing their jobs.
I see. Growing up there, um, did you played with white kids? You say?
It was a totally integrated project, and it even integrated couples. This is 1940s, but remember, in the 1940s there was an alliance with the Soviet Union against the fascist regime in Germany, Japan, Italy. But then I saw it shift, and so those integrated couples were actually driven out of the projects. But my father worked with Italian workers in National Marble Steel. He would go to those workers' homes and they were pounding on grapes with their feet, making wine. The projects was right next door to a Italian neighborhood in north side of Chicago called Little Sicily. And so it was a very different environment. It was the possibility of a different kind of America than, and so we had a lot of people who were moving up from the South Well, they were coming up from the sharecropping experience. They were coming up from that absolute apartheid horrors of Mississippi, because Mississippi was a feeding state into Chicago. Uh, and yet at the same time, I grew up, see, in an area of music. In other words, Jerry Butler, Curtis
Yes.
Mayfield, they were
Yes.
singing doo-wops on the corner.
All right, I got you.
You see, that's how I grew up. It was
I
a
got you.
rich, cultural, rich environment. Uh,
I got you. Let me ask you
yeah.
this question. Growing up there, did you see the racial strife of I know you talk, glowingly about the races coming together, but I mean this is kind of the civil rights era too.
Well,
And
a
maybe
little bit
some
before,
Black
what happened,
Panther and all that other stuff.
yeah, what happened in my particular case, what happened is my parents got a divorce, and my sister and I went to live with an aunt in Kansas City, Missouri. And so that's where I confronted the hardcore structural racism. Uh, and it was we moved there just 1 year after the Brown decision. So Kansas City was just beginning to integrate. And then we went and visited an aunt in Oklahoma City, and that's when I confronted segregated buses. Where the bus driver tried to tell me and my cousins we had to sit in the back,
How'd
and we
you
didn't
take
know.
that?
We said we ain't going to the back. We want to sit up in the front.
Yeah,
We got to argue with him until we got to our stop. But when we told my aunt the story after we got off the bus, she was very afraid. But
yeah,
we didn't have any understanding. It sounds silly to us,
yeah, yeah.
but
I always wondered about that. Yeah,
the thing that shaped our generation was Emmett Till. That was the real horror that we in Chicago. I saw his mother. I saw grown men crying on the street after hearing the story. Uh, we talked about, and we're teenagers. We talked about forming an army to go to the South. That was the real, and that really, it turns out that really shaped our generation, the generation of the SNCC
yeah,
activists, so on.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
Emmett
want to go
Till.
back to that. I want to go back to that. Being in the North as you were in Chicago, and I've talked to Southerners on the show who they lived through that daily.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
didn't, and I didn't, later on in Detroit. But when you went back and you had to move to North Carolina, she had to tell you to be cool. Could you accept being cool, or you could have took a butt whipping not to be cool? I mean, towards white people.
I kept bouncing up against it, and so yeah, I mean, I certainly wasn't cool in my thinking, but the reality is that Black people had a life, had a community. So we didn't really, even in Kansas City, we didn't confront racism on a daily basis. Uh, we had a church, there were businesses, there were communities. We a little bit experienced it in school, but because
Yeah,
my sister and I had come from Chicago, we didn't have that experience of moving from a segregated to an integrated environment. It was always integrated.
I got you.
And so, that mark of oppression that people write about, that wasn't on us at all.
When you were in Kansas, did you ever go to the Kansas side of Kansas City, which is the Free State, and see what that was like different than Missouri side?
Well, we were very close to Lucille Bluford, and Lucille Bluford was the editor of the Kansas City Call newspaper. That's also the newspaper that Roy Wilkins came out of. And so, uh, as I was saying, I mean, the Black people, even in Mississippi, as I talked to my friends, etc., they didn't experience this daily racism. Black people had been forced to create, and therefore created a community that was affirming and protecting. Uh, and of course, the violence, the horror of lynching and of violence did occur, but yet Black people also had a way of saying, don't mess with us.
Mm.
So they were always a family of people and brothers, etc., that nobody messed with.
Let me ask you this. and this is going to lead into the story, and I want to focus a lot of the time on it. Do you think you come from royalty?
No, I think I come from everyday people who made a difference.
Who? Tell us, who is your great great grandfather?
Well, Frank, who was born in South Carolina and was moved from South Carolina to Kentucky, to Pulaski County, Kentucky. And he hired out even while a slave. And then he was able to mine saltpeter, developed his own little factory of mining, of building and processing saltpeter, which is an ingredient in gunpowder. Now he's born in 1777. So now we're talking in the 19th century. He's
Let me stop you there. Do you resemble him?
Well, we don't have a picture, but my cousin, who is an engineer, retired, and she became a sculptress. And she didn't, we don't have a picture of Frank, but she studied the heads, the faces of family members. And so she fashioned this bust.
Okay.
And I hadn't met her, you know, as an adult. And when I first met her, she walks up to me and started rubbing on my face to see whether or not she had captured the resemblance through the generations. And so some people say she got it, you know.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. I can see resemblance. Let me tell everybody the story is they call him Free Frank McHorter, and you're his two-time great grandson.
That's right.
Of this gentleman. Now, go back to what you were telling us earlier of how he got to be who he was. The early days, as you know it, so on and so forth.
He was able to hire out and then sell this saltpeter, which, because of the War of 1812, the price of gunpowder increased dramatically. So the record shows that he was initially selling saltpeter at 17 cents a pound. It went up to $1 a pound. So by that, he was able to save enough money. So in 1817, he was able to buy his wife's freedom for $800. And then 2 years later, he was able to buy his own freedom for, again, $800.
Let me stop you there. And I mean no disrespects in these.
Yeah.
He's how old at this point? Maybe, as you might know.
Well, it's 77 to 1819, so he's approaching 40.
He's who is his enslaver, and why does his enslaver allow him to do this?
Well, it's interesting because George McWhorter is alleged to have been his father. He never really freed Frank, but Frank was very industrious. So when George McWhorter bought land in Kentucky, he brought Frank to Kentucky. He also then bought some additional land, and he left Frank as the manager of the plantation, even while he was a slave. And that's why he was able to not only take care of that business and maintain the financial security of George McWhorter's land, but he was able to develop his own industrial activity. Now, what's interesting is that George dies, and his white descendants have a choice. Are we going to sell Frank and sell the land, or are we going to continue to make money off of his industriousness? They decided to continue to make money off his industriousness, and that's why he was able to then, now they had originally promised $500, but for Frank's freedom, but because of the kind of money he was making for them, they raised it to 800, and he paid it. The reason he bought his wife first is she was pregnant, and they wanted the next child to be born free. And so she was then freed and then had the baby. So the focus of Frank's entrepreneurship was, today we would call it social entrepreneurship. In other words, entrepreneurship for a purpose. And his purpose was to free his family out of slavery.
Okay, let me stop you there. Okay, so he's got this plant. He's doing business as an individual with these companies, and they're buying from this black man, or is
Yes.
this is he got the enslaver helping him do the
No,
business operations and all that
no,
kind of
no,
stuff?
no, no. That's the interesting thing. He was doing business because they needed the saltpeter. Just like there were black people who were barbers. There were black people who did different jobs, uh, even back during slavery times, as free people, coexisting with the slavery system. Now, the reality is that his son, Frank Jr., had escaped and fled as a freedom seeker to Canada. Well, one of the things that Frank
No, hold
did
on, let me
was,
stop. That's your father, right?
no,
That's your
that's my,
grandfather,
no, that's my great uncle.
uncle. Okay, I got you. I got you. I got you.
So, so he bought Frank Jr., and when he brought Frank Jr. back, he knew he had to leave. So he took his children that he had, Frank Jr., and traded all the property he had amassed in his business for land in Illinois that a friend had sent him a letter about. He hadn't seen it, but he traded what he had in Kentucky for that land in Illinois. High ground in between two big rivers, Illinois River and the Mississippi River, and left in 1830.
All right, let me go back over here. I want to go back to his enslavement days.
Yeah.
So, does he have a business card? Yeah, I wonder how he's doing it. I mean, how do people know to buy the products from him?
Well, first of all, there was a market in a town not far from where he was living. And so he would take basically, we're talking a kind of powder that would be bagged up and taken to a market. And he would have to have relations with the purchasers of this saltpeter. And so, see, you're talking about the frontier. So you're not
Yeah,
talking about something as organized as we might think.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so we're talking about people who were operating. Basically, it's sort of like in the ghetto today. You know what I
Okay,
mean? The
okay.
people are buying and selling stuff all the time.
I got you. I got
You
you.
don't necessarily know where it came from, but you
Okay,
negotiate a price.
I got you. Let me
So
ask you
that's
this:
what was happening then.
from what you know about saltpeter, is it hard to make? Is it? I mean, has he done something that no, not? I'm sure he's not the only one doing it, but he does it better than anybody else, or one of the few people. Why did they deal with this black
Well, I mean, what? See, my cousin Juliet Walker wrote
guy? I
her
know her.
doctoral dissertation and it published a book called Free Frank,
Right.
University of Kentucky Press.
Sure. Sure.
And what she has indicated in her dissertation research is that he was not only productive, in other words, he produced a lot of product, but he was the kind of person that engendered trust. And so people could trust that on a regular basis he would provide the product. And therefore he was able to establish relationships. So even when he left Kentucky, a whole group of people signed a document attesting to his character. And because that was one of the requirements, really, for an African American to move around.
Hmm.
You had to have paper that said white people said you were okay.
With him being good like that, uh, is there some indication of how he got that way in his early days? I mean, like, how did he? And I'm taking liberties. You can say it. This did he know how to read and write, and he learned
No,
those
no,
kind
no,
of
no,
things?
no. It's clear that he was not illiterate.
Really?
So now imagine this, not literate, but intelligent enough to deal with money and people who could work the paper he needed to work. So some people write by picking up a pen. He wrote by getting other people.
To do the writing for him.
Hey, but he got
So
it
he
done.
never so he never did want to go back to school at some point, even after he got his freedom.
He very much, one of our family values has always been education. So when he founded the town of New Philadelphia, see, he leaves Kentucky in 1830, but that winter set in, and so he had to spend the winter in another county, and then after the winter, they came on to Pike County. They were the first residents of Hadley Township in Pike County. Well, he took 42 acres and plotted and became the first African American in the United States to legally plat and register a town. And as part of that town, he wanted to create a school. And so he actually had contracted a person to develop this school. It was going to be a seminary. This seminary would have been older than the University of Illinois. But the man tried to cheat him out of the money, and he had to go to court. Now, what was interesting is that the town was created in 1836. The very next year, 1837, he got a bunch of people to pass a law by the state legislature that legally created the name Frank McWhorter. Before that, and even in the census, it was listed as Free Frank and Free Lucy, because they wanted people to know they were free. But when this law was passed, now granted, there were black laws in Illinois, what were called black laws, that really specified what black people could not do. Well, this McWhorter law established their right to sue and be sued. In other words, they had the right to even sue white people.
Whoa!
In 1837. So, and here's what's interesting. Lincoln's best friend is the one who initiated the bill. Lincoln was in the thing and voted for it. So there's a whole thing in Illinois called Looking for Lincoln. And wherever Lincoln either spent the night, did a legal case or whatever, they have a sign. Looking for Lincoln. We found Lincoln. Voting for Frank McWhorter. And so in Barry, Illinois, there's a sign identifying in front of the church where Frank and Lucy went to church, Abraham Lincoln.
And from what you can tell, is he a jollible guy? Is he a stern guy? Is he very serious? Does he joke? You know what I mean? What's his personality trait?
See, it's hard to, we don't know a lot of the details, but we do know about his descendants. For example, my grandfather brought, what's that woman's name? The anti-alcohol woman.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
He was a great champion of abstinence. My father, for example, one of the great stories that he used to tell me that says something about freedom is he left New Philadelphia, where he had grown up, joined the circus. And when the circus got back east somewhere, the white men, part of the circus, raped a black woman. And my father was so outraged, he said, if something like that had happened where I grew up, that person the next day would be castrated. Well, somebody came up to him and said, you the brother that they're going to get for talking like that. He immediately went to the train station and got back to Illinois.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But what that says to me, and I know this from other relatives, etc., freedom has been passed down, an attitude of not taking low to the racist subordination that Black people were supposed to endure.
All right. That leads to this question. Did Free Frank ever face any backlash, any threat, almost lynching, or anything like that to because of who he was,
Well, one of
even
the
before
interesting
he left and then afterwards? That's two time periods.
well, one of the interesting things is that uh, first of all, I don't know any particular story, but I do know that there is a woman, a white woman, who lived right next door to the McWhorters, right across the street from New Philadelphia, and she wrote a lot of letters, and we have those letters, and she describes the relationships that existed. She even refers to the McWhorters as cousins. And one of the interesting things that she writes about is the abolitionist attitude towards sweeteners, because the abolitionists did not want to use sugarcane sweeteners. They call that blood-stained sugar. And so my great grandfather, Solomon, invented a way of processing sorghum into a sweetener. He was the first African American in Illinois to get a patent from the US government, and the fifth in the whole United States to get a patent for sorghum processing. And so she says Solomon's sorghum is doing good, and she talks about how much he's making and depends on how much he's producing, etc. So the stories we have are really very positive. But the
All
one
right.
thing that really is interesting is she in one of the letters she talks about some of those McWhorter boys are really good hunters. So she talks about guns. Now these are Black people that lived 20 miles from the Mississippi River, slavery, where Black people had owned land and had guns.
This is in the New Philadelphia town.
That's right.
Okay. I gotta ask you a question, and I mean no disrespect, but I can't be real if I don't ask you this.
Yeah.
From what we can tell, he had a white father. Did he look white, and did he pretend to be white in instances?
Well,
He
first of
had
all, he
straight
was
hair, whatever, whatever.
no. Uh, it's clear that he was, as they say, the first white man that moved into Pike County was a mulatto. That's written down in the 1880 history book. Uh, the the issue really is the issue of freedom, because it's clear that in getting that law passed, he wasn't passing for white. If he was passing for white, he wouldn't try to get a law passed.
I got you. That's a good point. I like that. Okay.
And secondly, uh, there was another family, the Walker family from Missouri, who also bought their freedom and moved to Illinois, into Pike County, into New Philadelphia. And as it turns out, the Walker women married McWhorter men. So
Oh,
the family was always, like a lot of Black families, a lot of different colors.
I got you. I got you.
So
Did
that,
did
yeah,
Go ahead. Did he so he had how many children? And was he married the whole time and that kind of thing?
yes, his wife, of course, lived longer. He died in 1854. Uh, she lived some 20 years after he died. But there were maybe the total number of people that he freed out of slavery was 16 people, starting with his wife and himself, and then 14 descendants, including grandchildren. And of that 16, some of them were purchased after he died because he left the money for them to be purchased.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's interesting because one of his daughters, Sarah, again, a woman who was not literate in Illinois, went back to Kentucky. The single Black woman now in a wagon goes back to Kentucky and buys 3 of her children from 3 different owners and brings them back to Illinois. And we have a picture of this sister. And you could tell from the sister, from that picture, she ain't nobody to mess with.
All right. That's incredible. So the nickname Free Frank really comes in after he passes, or it
No. As soon as he
beforehand?
bought his freedom in Kentucky, he started calling himself Free Frank.
I got you.
And again, if you call yourself Free Frank, you obviously weren't passing. White people don't call themselves Free Frank.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no question. That's a good point. No question. I like
and his
that.
wife was Free Lucy.
Yes, I like that. Did so he's doing this. Does Booker T. Washington know of him? Or is this is Booker T. Washington time? Does he go to the National Business League and get honors and stuff?
The main abolitionist that we talk about in Illinois is in Chicago. He comes out of Alton, Illinois. And as it turns out, we had relatives in Alton. In fact, until just a few years ago, their farm had been managed by the same family for over 120 years.
Mm.
And so and New Philadelphia is recognized as part of the Network to Freedom, the Underground Railroad, that the National Park Service has created. So we're doing that research. But a lot of the Underground Railroad and the anti-slavery experience was illegal, and so there aren't all those kind of records. And so, for example, the Berry Baptist Church in the 1830s has a book of its history, and written in the book are the 2 people that were sent to the Free Will Baptist meeting in Illinois, and one of them was Frank McWhorter. So now this church, mainly this church of white people, sending this brother to a meeting. Now, as it turns out, the Free Will Baptists were anti-slavery. So we have to wonder whether or not there was some discussions at that meeting that weren't on the official agenda that he went to, and whether or not there were networks of communication. So this is something that, and a lot of Black people have stories in their families, and we don't have all those stories yet. We don't have people telling their stories. And some families haven't really kept those stories alive. And we're not always debriefing the elders.
Let me ask you this. That leads to this question. What do you have of his? You mentioned the letters of not his, but the ladies. Do you have anything of his? Do you know, like anything?
Yes,
Coat,
yes,
hat,
yes,
jacket,
yes.
whatever.
We have documents of property, buying and selling, of bank records on little slips of paper, etc., where he makes a mark, make that X. So we have paper. We have some letters. For example, we have the reason we know about Frank Jr. in Canada is we have some correspondence that went between New Philadelphia and Canada. And we also have, Solomon was also a cabinet maker and so on. So we have some furniture that he made that's now on loan to the Smithsonian.
Mm.
And so New Philadelphia is featured in both the American History Museum and the African American History Museum.
Is there knowing what let me say this. When I interviewed Frederick Douglass's great grandson, 2-3-time great, Madam C.J. Walker's great granddaughter, what have you, this was pressure on them. They didn't want they. I mean, yours might be a different story. I don't know. And that's what my question is. Was this pressure on you to have to live up to Frank McHorter, Free Frank, in some respects?
Well, first of all, I grew up with this story. So it was just part of me. And I'm an activist from the 1960s. So to be quite frank, I mean, I wasn't following the footsteps of my elders. They appeared to me to be more conservative than me.
Oh, really? Okay.
And so, because they were part of building the infrastructure of the Black community under the conditions of structural racism. We, on the other hand, were breaking out and fighting back in a different way. Although I've come to learn that my aunt, my father's sister, was quite an activist in Chicago. And so she was one of the first Black women in Chicago. This is the 1940s and 50s, teaching Black women workers their union rights. So she was a social worker, but she was using that social worker as an activist. And then she became a cultural activist with Margaret Burroughs and was part of the founding of the Southside Community Arts Center and the DeSable Museum of African American History. So I grew up in this environment of freedom, and our family has always been involved in the freedom struggle. So it was, you know.
Yeah, because like I say, I've interviewed some people, and they kind of said, hey, it was too much pressure. I want to think that Frederick Douglass, one of his sons, committed suicide.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they assumed it was the pressure of having that as his dad, him as his dad.
See, that's why when you asked me that question originally, I said, these are everyday people who try to do right, who try to make a contribution. So Frank was not an icon. You know, he was a family founder and the establishment of the tradition that we all lived. And so I didn't feel any pressure on that.
Yeah, I got you.
And also because of the value of education, I didn't feel any pressure on that. I always knew I was going to college, even though neither of my parents went to college. But I always knew that. And so, you know, 7 people.
Okay, that leads to this question.
Yeah.
So you know greatness runs in your veins, and it to some extent. I mean, like if my dad's a good guy and what have you, but I'm wondering if I knew that he, grandfather had done something, I know I got to excel, and you did in your own right. And I guess I'm trying to get to that. Did your parents tell you this story one day? You sitting on the edge of the bed. Let me tell you who you are. Is that kind of how it goes?
Well, you know, it's interesting because it's always been there. I mean, even when I was in elementary school, I became sort of one of the reference points of Black achievement. You know, in my class, there were these 2 white girls who were always at the top. And the only, Afro that challenged them for the top was me.
I love it. All right. I got you.
And so I remember one day it was late. I was late going, I had been out with a cold or something, and I was going to take a test. And on my way there, its parents stuck their heads out and waved and wished me luck on the test. That's the kind of community I grew up in.
I got you.
And they were elementary school teachers who were young teachers who later, several of them became principals, who really understood the need to not only give me what everybody else was getting, but to challenge me.
I got you.
So many times, everybody be doing something, I'd be doing extra.
I
You know,
got you.
this was Edward Jenner Elementary School on the north side of Chicago.
Let me ask you this: did he become wealthy? And like again, I'm comparing it to the Matter Parker. They grew up in a big house. I mean, yours, as you tell me, did his sons, live off the wealth that he had? Was he ever wealthy? Any of those kind of things?
Well, what's interesting is that wealth is it's an interesting term because what people mostly mean by wealth is what did they accumulate, what did
Exactly.
they consume, and so from that vantage point, like a lot of farmers uh, who accumulated wealth when it comes to bank account, but not uh, large homes and large this and that. So I would say that the wealth that he accumulated went into buying family. There were no real the real wealth was missed because a railroad that was coming through and should have gone through New Philadelphia. And had that happened, then the value of the land that he owned would have uh, soared. There's an article by an anthropologist, a scholar at the University of Illinois, that demonstrates that the land that should have come straight to New Philadelphia bounced over New Philadelphia to continue on.
You mean the railroad? Yeah.
That bounce over, that
Yeah.
costs more money to do that, uh, is why New Philadelphia then ended up uh, not maintaining its growth and development as a town.
How many people ended up, and who were the people that lived in New Philadelphia?
Well, as it turns out, something like 150, 160 people was the largest population, and something like 40%, 30 to 40% of them were African Americans.
Oh, there were white people in his town.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, no. I mean, these are people who it was an abolitionist town. It was a freedom village, and so everybody that came knew to be here, you had to buy land from this black man, and you had to
Yeah.
be willing to live in this community that was owned and controlled by black people.
Was there something special about his governorship, political, other than what you just said? Like, okay, when you come here, we all got to go to church at a certain time, or we all got to be a certain religion, or you know what I
Well,
mean, or
no, I think that
some of his policies.
what we know is that the church, the school building, uh, was donated by him. So he was the benefactor of the town. But the town had a post office, the town had a grocery store, the town had a hotel, the
Oh,
town
really?
was stationed on the stagecoach route, the town had a blacksmith. And what was interesting, we grew up with the story in our oral history of the family that if a freedom seeker got to New Philadelphia, they could get a pair of shoes and a horse, and one of those McWhorter boys would help them get on to the north. Well, as
Moving
it
further.
turns out, the archaeologists have found there were two cobblers in the town. Now, why did they need two cobblers in the town making shoes? So that tends to corroborate the story that our family would tell about the freedom seekers. And Frank had the franchise for the wild horses in the area. So these facts tend to connect with the oral history. And, the town. Now, even the people in the town knew through their family about the history of New Philadelphia. And to show you, my father, who really was always a farmer in his heart, although he was an industrial worker in Chicago, they would always go back to New Philadelphia. And they knew the people they had grown up with.
So as it goes, and I think you just alluded to it, And your family, your father was the last maybe to live in the town of New Philadelphia, and then when did it kind of
No,
cease, or
his
what's the
father,
status of it now?
no, his father lived there until the 1950s. And it became it reverted back to farmland. But there were archaeological findings and so on. So the way we talk about it is New Philadelphia ended really uh, in the 1880s when the post office was decertified. But it remained a settlement for several generations after that. And when it ended as a town where people lived, although the last house that was built there was in the 1940s, it never ended as a memory. And now the rebirth of New Philadelphia is occurring virtually. And it now is a National Historic Site of the National Park Service. So it's a national park created in 2022. And so we're now in a great negotiation with the National Park Service and the local New Philadelphia Association to plan its development.
What does it look like? Is it flat land? Is it got a lake on it? What does
Well,
it look
here's
like?
what's interesting. Illinois is a flat state
Right.
until you get to Pike County. When you get to Pike County, it's hills. And so when you get to the New Philadelphia, the vista, you really see something. You see a place where you'd like to live. And it's right in between the Illinois River and the Mississippi River. And but the foundations of several houses that are there, one of the last landowners, the current landowner of some of the land, found some buildings of the same period of New Philadelphia. And he moved them to New Philadelphia on the foundations of the buildings that had been there before.
Oh, okay.
So, and there's a lot of different discussions about what to do in the future. One idea is ghost structures, which are just the frames of buildings without the walls, et cetera, to just give you some. But what we actually have there is augmented reality. We have signs that are really like little monitors, and you have a QR code, and you can use your device that will take you to actually a video. And there are about 12 of them as you walk the streets of the town. And you can really hear the story and see the avatars and to
How
introduce
big
you
is
to
it?
New Philadelphia.
Like square miles. How big is it?
It's 42 acres square, and it really had large streets. And as I said, the National Science Foundation has funded about 6 years of archaeological digs. And there are thousands of artifacts that are now in the Illinois State Historical Museum in Springfield, Illinois. And there have been many dissertations written. There are now several books that have been written. And as I said, there are artifacts that are in various museums in Washington, the Smithsonian, and in Springfield.
Speaking of book, I saw a picture of, I think you've written a book.
Yes.
You have it there? Yeah, that's plug. We plugging on this show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's right here.
Okay. And
And
New
the
Philadelphia.
second
Tell us about
edition
the
of
book.
this book, the second edition of this book will be out next year with the University of Illinois Press.
And the book is, tell us about it.
Well, it's a book that attempts to see my cousin's book, Free Frank, tells the story of the McWhorter family through Frank and Lucy and their offspring. So it's more of a family story. Our book places that McWhorter story in the context of the community of New Philadelphia in order to really get at the idea of freedom, because that really is the central idea. See, a lot of times when we talk about history, we talk about personalities. But when you start talking about the Underground Railroad And New Philadelphia is the station on the Underground Railroad. You're talking about all those families that came through that don't even know their history, their family connection to New Philadelphia. So I try to help people understand that uh, New Philadelphia used to be our story, meaning a family story.
I got you.
Now it's our story. It's
I got
everybody's
you.
story. You know,
I got a few more questions before we end. How do you get to New Philadelphia now?
it's right on Highway 72 that runs from Springfield right through to Hannibal, Missouri. And when you get on 72, there will be signs that will take you to New Philadelphia.
Do you fly into where? What's the closest airport?
Well, you can fly into St. Louis, you can fly into Quincy, you can fly into Springfield.
Okay.
Yeah.
When a person was enslaved, mostly the enslaved people who got to New Philadelphia came from where, and what might have been that route? Did they have to cross a lake to get there? You know, that kind of
Well,
thing.
there were really two main ways. One, of course, is from Missouri. So all you had to do was cross the Mississippi River and you were in free territory. But of course, you had to keep moving. And so there are famous stories that go everywhere from East St. Louis and St. Louis all the way up through Quincy and to the north. So, but mainly out of Missouri. And the second is coming up from the south, from Cairo, Illinois, uh, right up through the Mississippi River as well as the other rivers. Uh, that we have a map. I'll send you a copy of this map
Yeah.
of 429 locations we have identified in Illinois connected to the Underground Railroad.
Oh, okay. I see. What's so you have a foundation or something like that?
We have the
Uh,
New Philadelphia Association.
okay. And what do you all want to do? Do you all have reunions back there for people who've come from there a certain time of the year? Like if I wanted to come, what would be a good time that I could meet some descendants from that territory
Yeah,
or that,
yeah.
yeah, that kind of
The
thing?
governor of Illinois issued a proclamation making September 13th Free Frank Freedom Day in Illinois. And so there's always a major event on September the 13th, whatever that weekend
Yeah.
is. And
In New Philadelphia.
well, it's in New Philadelphia, and it will be in various places because it's a statewide proclamation. But there's
Okay, I
always
see.
something in New Philadelphia. We're now collecting petitions for a stamp, a postage stamp
Okay.
that honors Free, Frank, and Lucy and New Philadelphia. We're also working with one of the descendants, that sculptress I told you about who did Frank's bust. She's doing a larger than life sculpture that we hope to make an installation so that when people come to New Philadelphia, they'll see a life-size Frank and Lucy sculpture there. And then, of course, we've got a children's book being put together. So we're working on different aspects of how do you educate people about the story and link it to their own story. I mean, what we're trying to do is get Black people to realize that these weren't larger than life people. I mean, some people think of Frank and Lucy as a love story, as a family story. And people need to really evaluate their own lives. Uh, we are often taught about the greatness of this one or that one. We really need to focus on the meaning and the value that we can create ourselves and our families and our community. I mean, we've lost that. We've got to regain that. It's how we respect each other. It's how we invest in each other. How we make sure the next generation is better than us.
Do you want a movie of this?
Yes, of course.
Do you want this to be as big as like the Madam C.J. Walker story? Is that the hope? more people hear of what you know about him, and then
Some people have expressed that feeling that this should be the Harriet Tubman Sojourner Truth story of Illinois.
yeah, because I'm not I shouldn't say this, but he's like the first to do
Yeah, yeah,
it. I mean, that's how we might put it. He's the first to do
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I look. I'd love to have met the brother. You know.
it. Yeah. I don't mean to end on this note, but I guess I will. And then I'm gonna end on a high note. Is there some controversy surrounding him though?
Well, I would say it's an interesting question. Pike County currently does not have any African Americans living there. Pike County is a very supportive county politically of the current president. So the acceptance of fame for the county is challenged by the fact that the fame is related to an African American.
I see.
So there's that tension that we're working with. And I think we hear this phrase, the American people, and we hear this attack on DEI, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is a real test case because, as I tell people, don't blame it on me. You know, I mean, I was born a McWhorter. I didn't have nothing to do with that. You know, what I have to do with is, do I accept my responsibility, to represent, and so that's what I'm doing. And
You want to do speaking? Are you ready to step out there like this and
oh
do
yeah, no,
public
I mean,
speaking? And
if you go to the New Philadelphia Association website, you will see many videos where I have been talking about New Philadelphia and Frank McWhorter in a number of places around the country. And I would love to really engage people on this anti-DEI issue, because the question really is, are we interested in history as it happened, or do we all want to just make it up? And because the real story of New Philadelphia is also the story of how the West was settled. In other words, you can't talk about the westward. If you ask people who were the pioneers, who were the people who settled the country, you would get one kind of image. And that image wouldn't involve Black people. But for example, if you want to talk about who were the cowboys that were singing, making the cows chill out, those were Black people. The cowboys. Frank. So Black people were settling the country. You can't separate Black people from American history in any respect. And we have to be strong on that, and we have to represent that.
That's so true. I think the one thing that I also have to chime in on is that all the Black towns that I have found, there has been some racism that has destroyed that town.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the case with this one.
Well, the railroad is the case.
Is the case. Okay, so the railroad could have done that different.
Yeah. The railroad had come through.
Yeah.
But the railroad was tied into people from Missouri.
Yeah.
And so like I said, there's a scholarly article that went into the record, et cetera, and makes the case that, but in the southern part of Pike County, it has the reputation of being called White Pike. So there are a lot of sundown towns, even close. There's even some discussion of whether the Klan was active, but not in New Philadelphia.
So they protected New Philadelphia. New Philadelphia protected itself and didn't have that issue.
Like I said before, these are black people that own land and had guns.
I got you. I love it. I'm gonna close on this one in some respects. And you are a PhD college
University of
professor.
Chicago. Yeah.
You teach what?
I'm retired from the University of Illinois, and I was teaching in two departments, African American Studies, which I had headed up for a decade. And then I ended up also having a joint appointment in the Library and Information Science School because I had taken up this whole question of digital and the internet in relationship to the Black community and fighting the digital divide in the earlier days. Yeah.
I love it. I got just one more. Is there a question that I have not asked you? You kind of we've covered a lot, I would suspect, but is there a question I have not asked you, and or is that something you want to leave the audience with?
Well, two things. The question you haven't asked me is when am I going to come back and be on your program a second time?
Yeah, we can talk
But,
about that.
but I think the main thing is something I've been trying to say, and that is that every story that we tell, that story of New Philadelphia and the McWhorters, should be a model to replicate. Every community has stories that need to be told. Every family has a need to be documented. And so when we talk about African American history, we have to get Black people to personalize it and respect themselves. That's really a fundamental need in the midst of a racist society. Is, you can learn to respect Malcolm and Martin and Marvin Gaye or whoever, but respect yourself. That's the key.
I love it. Everybody, I told you you're going to like this one. This is Strong Inspirations, where I give it to you straight, no chaser, to intoxicate your mind, not DUI, but to make you stagger. And he made me stagger. I'm going to think about this a long time because every time I speak, I mention Frank McWhorter. It's a tremendous story, and he told it so eloquently. And I thank you so much for coming on the show. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. There is no love button, but I know you loved it. I know what I got. Do you all have a website how people can maybe donate, get the book?
Absolutely, absolutely. The New Philadelphia Association. Google that or search for that, and make sure that you indicate it's in Illinois, and you'll get all the information. And there's email. You can write and ask any questions. We'll answer it. And we're certainly interested in getting support of all kinds, including financial support. So please get in touch. We need your help.
Thank you so very much. Everybody go to my website, businessintheblack.net. I'm thinking, how far is that from Detroit? That's a little ways, but it might be a 6-7 hour drive.
Well, you got to go through Chicago and then come south.
Yeah. It would be great to be there. Are y'all doing something big on the 13th of September this year?
Absolutely.
Oh, everybody, you hear that, don't you? That might be a call to go down there. This will air before then. And if not this year, next year.
That's right.
Let's continue to support this cause. Support that effort.
Okay.
Support the thought of a Black man in the 1700s, born enslaved, was ingenious. Couldn't read and write and put an X on it, but he hired others to put their name to it, to tell him, and then he was astute enough to know when they were lying to him or tricking him and so on and so forth, and never faced any of that except for that one little incident, and he found a way around that.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. Thank you for coming on the show. I will stay in touch. We're going to talk again. I want to meet you. I do promise. I'm going to think about the 13th, see what's happening. Everybody, you know what to do. Go to my website, businessintheblack.net, get you a copy of my book, so on and so forth, and find out where I'm at. Thank you so very much for coming on the show. And I want to say this, and I mean this with all sincerity. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love who you've become. You said that, hey, I knew this in my history. I knew this in my family. And it's a beautiful thing that you recognized it and took it to your own highest heights. And are now spending your time to tell this story across America and the world. And I hope this strong inspiration will be a part of getting that message out. That's my charge. I thank you so very much for coming, and I'll meet you again. Not again, but I'll meet you at some point. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Bye
Thank you.
bye.